Hi, I'm Renelle BASI snowboard trainer, and today I'm going to show you how to service your snowboard and look after your equipment. So some of the equipment we'll be using today is I'll talk a little bit about diamond stone, edging tool, different temperatures of wax, a scraper, brush, scourer, and obviously we need an iron to put the wax on. The reason why we wax our snowboards is to give the board glide and maximum performance. Without wax, the board actually creates a suction and sort of sticks to the snow more. So we always want to create speed and glide over the snow without any of that suction. Normally, before we wax our equipment, we always take the bindings off. So we've got one board here with the bindings on. Make sure we take the bindings off before we wax the snowboard. Makes it easier to stick it through the clamps. And easier to have the consistent temperature across without the binding suction pads underneath the board. So how do you know when it's time to wax your snowboard? I'll show you. We have one snowboard here, which is very dry on the edges. You can see it has this sort of whitening effect along the edges here, and the base overall looks sort of grey instead of a nice shiny sheen to it. When to wax your snowboard? If you have a brand new snowboard, apparently I've been told it needs to be waxed 8 times before it's created its maximum absorption in the PTEX. So you could do that depending on how often you're using it. If you're using it every day, 2 or 3 times a week, as soon as you see that sort of grey line come towards the outside of the edges there. If you don't have a new snowboard, then 1 or 2 times a week would be great. So here's a board that I've been riding and it has been waxed. And I've ridden it for 2 days and it's a brand new board, and you can just start to see a small amount of grey coming through on the edges there, but it's not quite ready yet to be waxed. So let's get on with getting this board ready to ride. All right, I'll just set it up in the clamps here, tighten them up. Okay, and just a little bit about the diamond stone first. The diamond stone's used actually as a tool you keep in your pocket to keep the edges sharp once they're already sharp. The edging tool is used to sharpen your edges. So you have 2 options on these edging tools. I'll start with the edging tool first. You have 89 degrees and 88 degrees on this particular one. You can get, this is my travel edging tool, but you can get a larger edging tool that gives you more options. I like to ride at 89 degrees. There's also a small arrow on the file which tells you which direction to run the file. Okay, so I'm going to start with the edging tool first. I don't like to sharpen my edges from the very edge, so from about 5 centimeters in, I go in quite gently first, and then I start to apply some pressure from about 5 centimeters in from the widest point of the board. I run a long, straight run all the way through to the end. So I'll just show you what that looks like. Something that's not done very often is the base edge of the board. So why we do the base edge of the board is on seasons like we've had this winter, when the snow's very firm or when it's very, very slushy towards the end of the season, if you haven't waxed your board enough, the PTEX actually shrinks a little bit, and then this edge comes up a little bit edge high. And you can tell that by just running your fingernails along it, and I can feel here where it catches just a fraction, where it's a little bit edge high. So I'm going to take a little bit of that off as well. So there's 2 options here for the beveled edge, and 1 or 0.5. I use 0.5. Usually this is easier if the board's flat, but just to show you on the film. So I'm actually pushing the file really hard towards my hand here as I run it along. That's not working. It's working better that way. Okay, so once you've done this edge, undo your clamps, flip it over, and we'll go for the other side. I like to run my nose to tail But it doesn't really matter which way you go as long as they're long, straight movements. So we go back to 89 again. Away we go. Okay, and then I go back to 0.5. Okay, so when I've taught people how to do this, they often say they feel like they're hurting their board. So make sure you're doing that. You do want to be taking the edge off. That'll do, isn't it? Okay, so I've done with the edging and now I'm going to go into the waxing. The reason we do the edging first is because there's always little bits of file that comes off from the edge, and we don't want to push those little bits of file into the snowboard base. So, and also the edging tool would scrape the wax off the edge as well. So once it's been filed and you just want to wipe off all those little bits of file. So once we've done that, we're now ready to wax, and you have a choice of wax. I have 3 here. Normally you'd have yellow, red and blue. So yellow's for warm, red is for medium, and blue is for cold temperature, and green is always universal. So it's quite a large range of universal. So if you want to grab one wax, go for the green. Today I am going to use a mix between yellow and red, just because it's a bit more specific for the type of snow that we have here, and you can do that. So we'll get the waxing iron on. Temperature wise, you have a little temperature gauge on the waxing iron. I usually keep it on max. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so the waxing iron is warm now. It's smoking from the old wax that I've had on it from the previous time I used it. 9 times out of 10 you'd be using this universal wax. But today with the snow conditions that we have up here, I'm going to be using a blend of warm and medium. It's just at the end of the season, glacier riding, the temperatures are pretty warm, but also it's dumping with snow up there. So I'm using a blend of the two in this circumstance. So first things first, we start to put some wax on the snowboard. Okay, so I've put the yellow on and now I'm just going to put a little bit of red on. And that's a universal colour, by the way. It's usually the same, no matter what the country is. Wax, just a little bit through the middle there. Quite often it's ski race companies that make wax, so it doesn't really matter if you're using snowboard wax or ski wax. I tend to go with the ski brands actually, because they work better. Can I say that? Okay, so I'm starting with the iron now, and what I'm trying to do first of all is work the wax from the middle of the board to the edges, so I get the maximum amount of wax on the edges. We always have to keep the iron moving in circular movements, and you don't want to leave it in one section of the board for too long, because you don't want to actually bubble the base or work the PTEX too hot. When I get up to the end here, I just sort of spread it out a little bit. These clamps actually aren't ideal because they're clamps at the moment for ski equipment, so it's not quite wide enough. So my board might wobble around a bit as I put this wax on. It's not ideal. So you can see consistent circular movements. Just slide my board over a bit. So as I'm waxing the board here, the actual PTEX base is warming up, and it's opening up. The little tiny pores in the PTEX base is opening up, and the wax is actually seeping down in through the PTEX. So PTEX is made of different densities. You can get 7,000, 9,000, all different numbers of density. And that is how many balls of PTEX is per square inch. The denser the PTEX, the harder it is for the wax to get in. So I just keep it moving. You can see, hang on a moment. So you can see I also keep my hand underneath the snowboard here all the time. I'm just checking the heat, that I don't have any areas of hot sections, because I don't want to bubble the PTEX. Oops, it's quite difficult. So once I've done all the little circular movements around the edge, I then now will go in sort of more long movements along the board, longitudinally along the board to run the wax down. You don't really need to worry too much about the nose or the tail area right to the end. As long as you're just getting it to about here, that's great. So that's it, that's the waxing job done. We need that, let that dry now, and then we'll scrape it. Okay, so that's been resting for half an hour now, which is recommended time for the PTEX to absorb into the base. Another thing we were just talking about with the PTEX, the harder the PTEX, the longer the wax lasts as well. So when we're up towards the 9000s, the harder it lasts. The longer it lasts. The other thing, which is an advantage of having a stronger PTEX base, is you won't get a core shot as easily. And also, depending on the season, we had a Sahara dust storm this season, and when that dust gets into the snow, that happens every year, it sort of wears out the base a bit, and that edge high problem that we addressed whilst we were edging the board, I needed to do that once a week this year, maybe twice a week with a 7000 base. So if you can get a stronger base, better. So time to take the wax off. I'm going to grab the scraper here. There's a right angle on the scraper, which already has some wax on it, but there's a right angle here on the scraper. Hold the right angle against the base and start at the nose, and you can work your way down. You don't necessarily need to do the whole length of the snowboard in one go. You can just do a little bit at a time. I tend to do half, make a bit of a pile, and then turn the board around and go the other direction. Okay, so we just finished scraping the board there. It feels nice and smooth. Make sure you check it with your hand as well. Rub your hand over and see if you can feel any sections that have extra wax on. You'll get used to noticing where the wax is. So I'm going to structure the base now. To do this, first of all, I'll be using a brush. So I'll be starting from the nose, running down the tail in one long motion, trying to keep it as straight as possible. The reason that we use this structure brush as well is it puts little lines in the base, and again with those little lines it just means that the water runs off it a little bit smoother as well. You can see once I'm finished there's tiny little powdery little drops of wax as well, which I'm taking off with this brush.
Good. Yeah.
One more. So I've just finished with the structuring brush. There's some lovely lines in the snowboard now as I run down, and you'll find that there's sort of a bit of a waxy dust on the board as well. You can see there. Okay, so that doesn't matter so much if you've got that waxy dust. I like to just use a kitchen scourer at the end after that to take all of that off. Again, I'm still putting fine lines in the board. I keep my hand flat. Just run it on one straight line from the nose to the tail. Just gives it a nice matte finish at the end. So I'm just going to now detune the contact points to, reduce any chance of edge catching. I like to check them once I've already done it and it's already completed, and I feel that's a little bit too sharp. Normally I would have another file at home, a longer version of this to do that, but at the moment I'm just using this little travel file here. So I would start about 5 to 8 centimeters in from the contact point. I'd use light pressure working into firmer pressure towards the nose of the snowboard, and I'd always use the edge And I'd always use the file at a 45-degree angle. So I'm working like so. The reason I do this is to stop catching an edge. For example, if you're doing a little backside 180 or you're spinning or you want a nice smooth entry into the turn, when it's too sharp on this top section, the board bites and drives into the edge really quickly and very fast, and sometimes that can catch you off balance a little bit when you're doing a little spin and landing 180s, or if you're going really fast and you drop in on a high edge angle into a carve, it bites a bit too quick and can knock you off a little bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and take that off each end. So when you buy a new snowboard out the wrapper, the edge will be uniform across the entire length from contact point to contact point all the way around the nose. So it is always worth detuning the snowboard. If you're a sort of lower level beginner intermediate, you might want to detune a little bit further down, probably to about sort of 8 to 10 centimeters. A higher level intermediate advanced, you can probably go from about 5 centimeters from the widest point. So yeah, voila, that's done now. There's one more stage which I would have added to this, but I don't have it with me at the moment. It's a small little rubber, which I'd run along the edge this way after the edging process before the waxing process. So I'd run it along the edge this way, and I would run it along the edge this way as well. The waxing process is pretty much the same for skiing and snowboarding. It really does make a difference to your performance by keeping on top of your equipment and making sure that it's running well. It also is great for the longevity of your snowboard as well. You really don't want that PTEX shrinking too much and the edges coming up too high. It's not an enjoyable process while you're riding, and having nice sharp edges gives you lovely grip and drive throughout your turns as well. Having the wax board obviously gives you much more glide and speed, get over the flat sections, and you've got some nice speed through your turns. It helps with precision. So when we're working at high level as an instructor, we're always looking for precision throughout the arc length. We're always looking for grip and drive, and this helps you get accurate feedback from the board so that you have more precision in your riding. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope you enjoy taking care of your snowboards. See you.